Um, Hello everyone. I'm Prathama and I'm a mental health therapist. I am here to have a conversation with Lawang on navigating masculinity. And being a therapist, I have conversations with many people and a lot of young people who are navigating masculinity in their lives. And this is just to, I think, understand what it's like from different perspectives. So here I am with Lawang.
So yes, I'm Lawang. I am a teacher, and I guess I'm here to talk about my experience with navigating masculinity, and happy to be with you, Prathama. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Lawang. So the first question I have is what the word masculinity itself evokes for you, right? Like when you think of masculinity, what comes to your mind?
Well, I guess having been part of the society for as long as I can remember, I think I would say that the word kind of evokes the very standard kind of notions of what it means to be a boy or a man, right? I guess being a male member of the family, you're supposed to kind of be like the provider, right? Or at least there's an expectation. And for the same reason, I think you are also a bit more privileged in a way, like when you're growing up, because society already looks at you from a certain lens. So, yeah.
In what way in particular?
No, I think, growing up, I've felt this myself that, like in school, I used to be like one of those, students who are good in studies and all of that, and I feel that, especially for male students, it was like, at least in my context, right, it was a given that you were somehow like entitled to be like active in certain spheres, I guess.
No, I was wondering how you would, now thinking back, you're noticing that, right? Like what would be ways in which it would be noticeable for someone that you were expected to be active in certain spheres,
So I guess in terms of, say, for instance, like physical aggression, right? And economically being like active in a way. I think that's another thing. And I guess in general, just take like the leader, like just by default, kind of be the leader of the pack, or if it's the family or the larger community, like you're like kind of expected to be to take that leadership position, I guess. So I guess leadership again would be another kind of quality that I guess like defines masculinity like as it is.
And would you know these things by, would people say it? Like how did you notice that this was what was expected, Like was it looking around and that's what you saw? Now thinking back, what do you think influences that? Knowing that this is what is expected.
I guess these are just like it's part of the culture, right? And it's reinforced through generations. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's also how I came to kind of be programmed that way, right? So I guess the first kind of source of that that kind of, I guess, I don't know, morality or
Mm.
what do you call it? What's a more appropriate word? Those values, right? Would obviously be your family, right? I guess that would be the first source, and then of course like the larger society, when you go to school, when you learn to socialize and you meet like people your own age from other families, and then you get introduced to these families, and then I guess in those social spaces, I guess like that's how I also like came to form my own opinion about masculinity, I guess.
Yeah. And was your experience of masculinity or being perceived as masculine, right? Like in that sense, I mean, or being a boy, was your experience of it and different from what was expected? Yeah. Do you remember that?
I guess in some ways yes, I also got I was quite fortunate to have been part of a very small school community. Now in hindsight, I think like people who attend like these huge schools, like thousands of students, I think they have a very hard time kind of finding their own self, and and then developing bonds with their immediate circle. That way, I think I was a little fortunate because I didn't have to go through a lot of struggle. I mean, there was some instances where like you get exposed to these like social kind of, I guess, forces. But then, relatively, I would say like it was kind of easy. I didn't really have to assert my masculinity that way. I guess it also kind of helped that I was like naturally like predisposed to all sorts of activities. I did not just, I mean, of course, there's the expectation that like like these gendered kind of activities, right? So girls do this, boys do that. So there was never that pressure, but I guess my natural tendencies to also like just be inclined towards like more male activities like sports and athletics and all of that also kind of helped, made it easier for me. Whereas if I had like other inclinations, I probably would have felt a little challenged. Maybe. So, I guess that's how I like. Yeah, those instances would probably be like what what I had to kind of maybe become masculine in a way.
Yeah. And are there moments since like where you notice like these sort of dictates of masculinity that you're not okay with, but you notice the demands on you, to be something, to do something, or
even in the workplace or like among friends, of course you feel that that kind of pressure. It's definitely there. You're expected to kind of be, a certain way, behave in a certain way. I mean, just the other day, like I was meeting my old friends from school, and the conversations I could really pick up, the kind of values that those kind of I could notice my friends behave in a certain way that was very representative of the mainstream and the very standard expectation of masculinity, and I was really aware of that, but of course I didn't really have to succumb to that, so in a way it's a relief that I don't really have to like cave into those pressures, but I'm also aware that like not everyone has that kind of, I guess, like privilege, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I have friends, like in my circle, like who probably like show signs of having kind of this problem, of having to kind of come to terms with, with that fact, I guess. So I guess one kind of really big challenge that this very this kind of demands of masculinity that it poses, I think, is when you're trying to form relationships, especially with the opposite sex. It's, I think, you just, if you have not like really thought these things through, and you have not really considered, like all the possibilities, and like really, if you haven't really spent time thinking about it and trying to really like work on it, I think it's really hard for those people. So I see people around me like who struggle with that, and for some empathetic towards them, but yeah.
No, I think that's a good that's a good point, right? Like both of these things that you were saying, one in groups of friends and men together, let's say, as well as in relationship with women, is when the demands of masculinity, or the ones that you're not okay with, maybe show up more. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely.
So then I was wondering, you were saying that I don't want to succumb, or I don't have to succumb to it. You were saying that, right? Like, so I was wondering, how were there times when you felt you had to, and this not having to now is sort of new for you? Is it different? I mean, not new, but is it different? Has it been different over time?
Yeah, very early on, like I said before, that's why I said like I was lucky to have been part of a very small school community to begin with, right? Because if if that community was a little too big, then the demands would have been like equally, bigger, I guess, and so it would have been very difficult for an individual to kind of, just be themselves and like assert themselves. So, but then of course, like there were times, but I guess I was again fortunate enough to have a large part of that. The credit also goes to like the kind of culture we had in our family, right? And so which is kind of largely kind of very secular, and we don't really, we're kind of open about things, and very very casual about like we're not very conservative, and in my family, or at least the family that I grew up with. Again, in hindsight, I also learned a lot of things about like masculinity and how to navigate like again these dictates and of masculinity, and how to like carry yourself in a relationship. Of course, like there were many flaws, and hence I had to break up, right? So, but it was a very good learning experience. If I hadn't like been through that, I guess I wouldn't have become wiser, or I wouldn't have learned all those things, and so so that also helps, I guess. So.
What are some things that are part of this becoming wiser?
I think one of the main things is that you learn to empathize, right? Because I think growing up, because it's so competitive, I think it's always been competitive, but starting from the time when I was in school, right? I think it's gotten much worse now. So there's so much pressure around like you having to be like this ambitious, person trying to assert your own self like over everything else. It's becoming increasingly like individualistic, I think. So in that sense, like it's becoming even more challenging to like empathize with the other person, right? So I guess that's one major lesson, right? To learn to like think, or at least try to think from another person's perspective, and to try to put yourself in their shoes and try to at least be ready and willing to kind of understand their circumstances, and not just be like very focused on the self and just your own surrounding, right? So I guess that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned. I think it's just that I have never really had to think about my masculinity ever, right? So that's also why it's so difficult for me to come up with, like really good talking points, I guess. Yeah.
No, but I think, this, what you just said, I think is the point of this conversation, like the fact that you have never had to think about masculinity, right? Like I have had to think about masculinity a lot.
Absolutely.
Despite the fact that I don't navigate it, and so I do navigate it, like we all navigate it. So in that sense, but I think that is actually the point of these conversations in a way for me too, because I think it does speak in some ways to also the privilege of masculinity, right? Like that's the reason we are not talking about masculinity. So one more question I have is what supports the resisting of the like these dictates of masculinity, and what enables it also? And for you personally, what has supported the you mentioned some things, but what would you say has supported the resisting of certain dictates?
I think my family has been like one of the crucial, contributors like to my my being, slightly more like liberal in my views, right? And also the fact that the pressure wasn't so unbearable like when I was growing up, right? That and I guess, and the kind of environment that I was like exposed to, like and I think I grew up with like my father like passed away when I was very young, so I don't really have any memories of him, like actual memories. We'd have photographs and all of that, but I think that also helped in a way, like I didn't really have, I think, that kind of constant presence in the background, like that tyranny of a father, and so because there are some some of my friends who used to struggle with that, because of that tyranny, right? The tyrannical figure of a father. So I didn't have that. I think that also helped me kind of make my own way, make my own course, like as I as I wished, So I guess that's also one very big reason. I had like that freedom to be whoever I want to be, express myself whichever way, So there was never really any pressure. So, but of course it might not have the same effect like on others, as it did in my case. But yeah.
Is there a book or a film, that that has been a particular influence in thinking about this, like masculinity or navigating of masculinity for you? Or that now comes to mind?
Very on a personal level.
Yeah.
Okay. Personally, of course, I think I'm still, during my formative years, I think, and I'm sure this is true of like many like teenagers still, you are influenced by like the existentialist authors. So I guess I would say that, and then I guess in a way it's kind of a rite of passage also, because after that I guess once you've really tried to grapple with a problem like that, I guess like everything else kind of becomes easier, in a way, right? Because you've already kind of dealt with like your sense of self and who you are, not just as a social being, but also as this creature that you are. So I guess that helps. So
is there any particular existential?
Yeah, but again, like, but I think with the same set of thinkers and authors, there's also the possibility of becoming kind of again indoctrinated, and also there's also the risk of this thing becoming like very self-serving, So again, I think like I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but I guess like the more ideal thing to do would be to still keep like searching, like keep like moving beyond what feels very familiar at any moment, and then just keep like exploring, I guess. So yeah.
Thank you, Lawang.
Thank you, Prathama.
Yeah.
It
was a pleasure.
Narcissistic rant. Yeah.